I am happy to turn it back over to you, Lizzie, but I'm happy to listen in and let me know if there's anything else that would add to your experience with CIRD's workshops, and any resources that we can help connect you to, national level, federal level, just let me know. So thank you.
Thanks, Evelyn. So this evening's session is really building off of, if you were in Millinocket earlier today at lunch, where we asked everybody to look at some elevations and answer some questions and talk about some of the things that, some of the strengths that we should be building on, some of the opportunities along Main Street that we could address. In the couple of hours since that ended, the team has been brainstorming and starting to put some ideas on paper or digital space. And ideally, you know, we would be meeting in person, kind of doing this together with pens and pencils and paper, but we thought for this session, because we wanted to be kind of in a larger group, and this would be the kind of thing where we'd be huddled together, that we would do this online. And so what we're going to do right now is really get into some of the design work. So building off of today's earlier conversation and the 2 virtual workshops that we've done over the last couple of weeks, and then even further back, past planning work that y'all have been involved with the Gazetteer and other planning efforts. And so I'm going to turn this over to James, who's going to share his screen and we're going to start talking about kind of big picture ideas around traffic on Main Street, and start looking at some visuals and then going from there.
Good evening. My name is Mitchell Racer. Actually, not James. James is running the show for us at the moment. So again, my name is Mitchell Racer, and I'm a landscape architect and planner based here in Maine. So it's exciting to be up here in Millinocket with you. We work with communities all through New England and Maine on projects like this and waterfront communities. So today was a great opportunity to get to meet people, get to know the community, get to understand the vibe of the place, the history, the physical element, how things seem to function, sort of the image of the place, and start to begin to really absorb that. And so we're working through that right now. And tonight we just wanted to share with you some of our initial impressions. We still actually are sorting through a lot of the comments that we received today, which was great. That was a great workshop. So throughout this whole process, you know, we're leading up again, just to remind you, like a lookbook that we're going to be creating that's going to be sort of all these ideas sort of distilled into a whole bunch of different drawings that deal with the whole fabric of the community, be it the streets, the neighborhoods, in aggregate down to actual building facades. So, you know, we're sort of juggling a lot of pieces right now, but slowly those all are going to come together through our conversations and input into a more sort of a cohesive overall package for you. So we have different resources and talents to pull on. So I'm going to sort of just talk about some of my initial impressions just on sort of the Main Street and what might, you know, what are some potential opportunities to move forward with that and sort of try those out as and get some initial feedback on that. But it's as we all know, it's a unique situation because you have this amazing downtown, this incredible core. Right now, a lot of people are coming up to the region, about 30,000 people, I guess, a year, and they're heading, you know, it's the gateway sort of up to Katahdin, Baxter State Park. But as we all say, you know, it's like just getting people to take that left onto Penobscot or onto Main Street, you know, would be a big win to help with economic development, to help with sort of the character of the community, you know, to really have impact on everything from the housing to businesses to overall sort of four-season vitality. So we do know, in looking at this existing pattern, so you see the major Route 11 out there, and then you have your current setup of Main Street, which is really a one-way street that then becomes two-way near the end. So right now you have that, that very distinct pattern. You can turn off and right onto Main Street if, inspired to do so or inclined to do so. So a big part of what we're going to be looking at, and I know there's been discussions about that, is that actual intersection as the gateway. The gateway is the intersection, the building is the intersection, the proposed park is part of the intersection, how all that can come together in a cohesive way to mark that as a threshold to not just Katahdin and Baxter, but as a threshold to here. And sometimes I've been throwing out the term, a little cutesy, that's like the trailhead to downtown, like, stop and pause and enter into downtown and then filter into all the different stores from there. So this is the existing conditions. You have a great connectivity of great residential neighborhoods right up to downtown. It's very walkable, very safe, very low volumes of traffic, very low speeds. Everything we've noticed today felt very comfortable. But we wanted to look at potential opportunities for sort of starting to rethink Main Street just in terms of traffic circulation. And I did want to note real quick at the bottom, there's some notes you can see they're typed up, but the need for the gateway, some underutilized parking, and that could just be this year, or it could be the time. There's, we noticed for sort of a region known for sort of wood products and forestry and the working forest and Baxter, sort of a lack of that sort of trees and forest and street trees and sort of what I might call urban forestry, or that ecology downtown. And it'd be great to sort of see some more of that authentic aspect of the regional ecology, introduced into the downtown for many benefits: economic, environmental, aesthetic, branding. I mean, it's, they're not mutually exclusive. They all reinforce each other. There is one thing we did notice, there was this desire we thought, oh, we can make wider sidewalks and have a little bit more breathing room there for outdoor events and make it, you can have street trees, et cetera, et cetera. But we did notice that this is one of those sort of geeky things. We happen to notice that all the stormwater system is built right into your curbs, and it's very expensive then to move those curbs. So we're going to leave those curbs pretty much in place in some of these ideas and look at how we can basically work with that space between the buildings, they call it the outdoor room, and how that can be reconfigured in different ways to create a really inviting place that's really business friendly, really walkable. There's like a destination, a pause before people might go up to the Baxter on their way back down, get them to, stop in town. So those curbs, we really think need to stay in place. Those sidewalks are ADA accessible, but the idea of moving those curbs is, I think, really expensive. So we're trying to look at some, lower cost alternatives that the community can test out over coming years, potentially, if there's interest in any of these ideas. And then if some of those ideas take hold, then you make it more permanent type transitions to some of these improvements. We want to maintain everything I said was like, none of these things are mutually exclusive, so they can all reinforce each other as sort of a regional brand, as a downtown brand for Millinocket. We want to focus that through traffic and all that traffic on Main Street, keep it on Main Street. There's not really need to go off into the external neighborhoods, although it'd be nice for people to use that foot traffic. And then, I use that trailhead already, but imagine Main Street as your downtown, and then there's the library over here, there's a river over here, there's parks. If you can sort of, I don't mean to overplay that sort of cliche, but like the idea that these are trailheads and then lead you off into other parts of the community and the fabric of the community and other benefits and all these great assets. I mean, you have a linear river corridor right next door, you have great neighborhoods here, great neighborhoods there. And so it's really just a matter of making these links and these connectivities to pull people into it. So that's sort of our existing take on some of the things. And then we thought, well, what are some of the potential iterations of that to explore? And these are all diagrams at this point. And we want to just get some feedback, as tomorrow will be a great time in person to get feedback, or tonight. So thanks. So the one way plus the forest, this idea really, and if you can see on the screen there, There's the, basically it's, maintaining the street, well, one way, I guess it'd be the other way, but same idea, a one-way street. And then if you can look at that diagram, you can sort of see a linear green strip down the edge. And the idea is there really wasn't room on the sidewalks or street trees. There was sort of a underutilized amount of parking, and we thought it could be a terrific, opportunity in different levels of intensity, or sort of scattered through that, to introduce the idea of sort of the working forest into. I'm on my screen. Oh, there, and here's a drawing of that. So how there's a potential to take some of these, to shift, so you don't lose any parking spaces. You keep it one lane, you maintain your on-street parking, and then down through the entire community, basically you introduce a linear park, and that can be continuous, it could be broken up into pieces, but it'd be a real great way to sort of cut and paste the ecology of this area, the actual landscape of this area, the richness of this area, the biodiversity of it, and bring that downtown, which I really think is really needed in that downtown, is that sense of sort of the context of this place. And that could be done through these sort of pocket parks that are really easily just retrofitted into your existing curb to curb real estate. You don't have to, it's very low cost. You can start with sort of temporary initiatives, doing little phases of it. But the idea is to bring into downtown Millinocket that sense of the history of forestry and the future of forestry and sort of the ecology of that. And this is like using basically place as branding, using trees and the actual ecosystems of the area as branding. So it's almost as like authentic as you can get. It's not just sort of symbols, but it's actually living, breathing ecosystems that can be used to help create a sense of place, as well as reinforce the brand and the identity and the character of the area. So this one's called the one-way forest, and it's one-way plus forest, sorry. So you have a forest downtown. Imagine sort of almost like a part of the Appalachian Trail, sort of cut and pasted and brought to your downtown. You can sit in it, eat in it, dine in it. It's used for stormwater runoff. People can relax in it. Bring obviously a diversity of animals to downtown, birds and other critters. So it really be a great sort of it would work on many different levels and be a very inexpensive thing to try to implement, a low cost way to implement placemaking and marketing and branding at the same time. So then the next diagram we came up with was really, I did go out and measure your curb to curb, and you have about 42, 43 feet. And a lot of communities, to be honest with, that there's a few communities still in Maine that have one-way main streets. Not many. I do a lot of work in Rockland. I'm working there right now on a couple of projects, and they have a one-way main street, and I know Madawaska does, but there's not a lot. But most of the communities that we're working with are actually asking us to, how do we get back to a two-way street? And usually they want two-way for a number of reasons. They want it because it's just more connectivity. It's easier to drive around. It's more intuitive. The businesses like it because traffic can go either way. You can get to your business either way. You don't have to do full loops. If you miss something, you have to loop back around. It's just very practical. And it's just the actual very, very traditional form of a main street. Most main streets you'll find are two-way with on-street parking. And what we found in this, just quickly looking at this today, was you can, with your existing road, which probably was originally two-way, you can have on-street parking both sides, and then you can have two lanes, two 12-foot lanes, and it's a very straightforward, very, very low-cost conversion. The only real cost would be adding a signal up at the gateway at 11. So it's a very straightforward thing that could happen. It's done with this striping, some paint. It's not a big cost, no changes to drainage, no changes to infrastructure. But then we have a variation on this, the two-way conversion. I think this is called two-way conversion plus green. So in this one, the two-way conversion, you can still have a two-way street, a very traditional downtown main street that's, like the business, it's very, very business friendly. A lot of businesses love that. It's very intuitive to use, but some of that on-street parking could be install this idea of sort of these sections of the forest from taking the surrounding ecology and forest and bringing that in. So you could, some of the on-street parking areas can be sort of staggered, and those can become the forested little parks, because you really can't fit street trees in this landscape because of the fixed curb locations. But you could, even with this two-way conversion, have introduced that idea of sort of the ecology and the forest into it. So it's like street trees, but like much more exciting. It's almost like parks. Street tree, it's much more symbolic than just, it's not just symbolic or sort of, like a simple tree, but, it has a lot more richness to it. And so these actual spots of ecology could be actual places that you use and have ecological as well as economic value. So then the next one we looked at, and this is a unique idea, and we basically were really inspired by what you have here, by doing sort of a variation on what you have. Right now you have basically, a one-way street coming in, and then, a one-way, two-way street that intersects at the park. And the idea here would be that you could actually, can sort of maintain what you have. So you're not like introducing something radically new, but bring those sort of one-way streets further into the downtown, and then have a section in the downtown, a small section that can be, you can either at that point split off, but it could be really become a small section of downtown that becomes your downtown sort of common, and that can be a pedestrian zone. It can be designed in a way that can be flexible, so cars can use it, delivery trucks can use it, but you really could, it's basically taking what you have here today, but as you move and drive towards the center of the town, you're actually moving and arriving towards a destination in the middle of your community. So you have your initial gateway up at 11, and then as you move into downtown, there's something in the center. And again, this is not, a lot of these ideas aren't mutually exclusive. You can see on the top part of the screen, the road sort of curves through it. We almost saw the idea that you could have some of these forested parts, wooded areas along Main Street. And then on that top part, we almost have it more curving, like almost like a trail. So that's almost, we call it in engineering or street design, we call that chicane for traffic calming purposes. But you sort of move your way through it. So it really would create a very beautiful sense of sort of almost moving through the downtown and moving through, these street trees and this native vegetation, and this sort of sense of ecological place.
Depending on where these different forested bump outs are located, it could also provide adequate commercial overflow space. So now you have outdoor seating, you have, places for those hikers to take their stinky boots off.
Right.
Like that.
Yeah. So in that one through. So if that's very important to note, is that these areas are not, they are very much a multi-use area. These are areas that are really extensions of the businesses. They're civic spaces. You can dine in them. You can rest in them. You can have a beer in them. You can have, you can have a book, kids can have book clubs. There could be farmers markets, whatever. They're flexible spaces. These are not like pristine nature that are fenced off. These are very much integrated into the downtown fabric. And they're really a way, and especially because we're thinking about this right now with COVID, a lot of these businesses are trying to figure out, how do we open up to the street? How do we occupy the street? How do we, have a sense of ownership of that street that's safe? And this could be a way to do that in the long, long run, where people seasonally in the summers can open up their businesses. They can have more flow out to the street. There could be a lot more energy, foot traffic, dynamism in the street that relates to what's happening. And then in the winter, as things get colder, you can move back indoors and just still have these beautiful spots outside. So they're really flexible spaces. There's not a hard line, like, these aren't like pure nature that we're putting a fence around. They're very much urban ecology that's integrated to the downtown. So then on the other thing, in the center of this, the yellow area, in this example, you arrive to that center area. That happens to be just coincidentally a very dynamic, or very symbolic block downtown. It's a very strong wall of buildings. You have the post office there. It's a very sort of strong civic center. And that could be just a great area to be a pedestrian zone where, you know, it's very safe to walk around. There's lots of parking within moments of that. You can park, walk to that area. It can just be a great outdoor gathering area with seating all the time. But like we said, it could be flexible. You can open it back up to traffic when you need to, or for deliveries. You know, it's you know, none of these designs are sort of like hard written like the curbing is. There's a lot of flexibility to that, especially in the beginning. If you're just doing sort of temporary installations to test out the different ideas, those can be done with cones or Jersey barriers or boulders or flower planters. And in this one, so that downtown center, you arrive to that downtown. There's this great sense of arrival at the middle, and there's, you know, really there's a there to arrive to. On the bottom half of the screen, we just sort of showed again in diagrammatic form. Instead of having the road winding like a path through the woods, the road's just more of a straight shot with the idea of this sort of multi-use sort of park, you know, sort of North Woods Park down Main Street, sort of running it straight to it, and less sort of movement with the cars through that. So it's just two different approaches diagrammatically. But we think that it's really important to draw people into downtown. It's really important to increase that connectivity. It's really important to make it a intuitive and user-friendly place. You need parking, you need shade, you need, you know, a welcoming feeling, you need a reason to turn off 11 on to Penobscot. And we think a lot of these are, all these things added up could, you know, give you that. So this is some of our initial diagrammatic impressions with, you know, that we're just starting to think of. But we think all these are very low cost approaches and are, you know, you don't have to commit to it. You can actually test it out and see if you like it, and then tweak it and move forward a couple years down the road. So thank you. Now we're going to move on to sort of the comments. Yeah, we're going to open up the dialogue. Sorry.
So does anyone have any comments or questions, or which of these options, is there one that folks are gravitating toward? Are there elements of one that people feel like, you know, intrigued by, or they're like, you know, kind of combinations of them? And just to remind everyone, there was the first option was the one-way plus the forest. So the one-way, kind of keeping the one-way, but converting some of the parking, the existing parking, into this forest strip. The two-way conversion, which would be kind of a straight up two-way conversion of what's existing. So you would have, you know, traffic going in both directions. A two-way conversion that might use some of the parking, the on-street parking, for these kind of pocket parks, these linear strips of park. And then the last one that we just saw, that split conversion, which is kind of building on what's existing. You would have a one-way coming from Central down Penobscot, and then a one-way in the other direction, and then they would meet in the center at this kind of common area, which could be closed off for pedestrian access. And then Susan asked, or said, love the forest, whatever way makes the most sense for businesses. How do large trees work in the environment, or survive in that environment? Thinking overhead wires, roots, etc. And let's see, I guess I should turn my microphone off. We have a challenge in that we're all in the same room, and so we have our microphone or our speaker off. So if you're speaking and we can't hear you, I apologize. So I'm going to turn myself on mute. We'll all be on mute and then turn our speaker on. Susan's question.
Oops.
Oops, we can't hear you.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
I had,
Thanks for putting up with our technical issues here. But to your question, trees downtown, there's in terms of the ability to see the stores, a downtown like this, a lot of that is foot traffic. People are parking. There's a lot of destination stores, and we find that adding street trees is really a net benefit and really doesn't detract from the businesses on that question.
It might actually require maybe perhaps some rethinking of signage. So for instance, wall signage that would be located roughly in the same height as the tree canopy might need to be reconsidered, but
Lower.
perpendicular signage that comes perpendicular to the building face is perfect for pedestrian and car traffic, especially as they're turning down that road. So also to remember is that none of these canopies are going to be right next to the building. They're going to have a whole sidewalks distance between them, and then be.
Can folks hear you?
You're on mute. I was talking through him basically.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, perpendicular signage and relocating wall signage could be a potential way to alleviate any visual problems. But I wouldn't anticipate the tree canopies would be so low that they would block much.
And before we even get off that point, just because it's important to stick to, because we know, facade presence is important and visibility of those facades. If you're walking, say if you're driving, your typical height's like at about 4.5 feet, 3.5, 4 feet. I guess you're an SUV, might be taller, but these would be sort of like limbed up trees, urban trees. So you'd have very clear views through to the stores and people. So it'd really be, it would not be like a solid, like landscape planting, like a hedge.
Think of it as a curtain, not as a screen.
Yeah. Yeah, you can. Yeah, and it's like filtered views through. In terms of the ability for them to live in the city, they thrive with the right soils and plantings, and we just think it'd be great to use the existing drainage patterns that are there, and these could actually work as green infrastructure and help absorb some of that storm water. So it'd be sort of a net benefit in terms of sort of putting forth the sort of an environmental ethos about treating the stormwater. So the hardiness is not a big concern.
And typically a street tree is planted in a 6 foot by 6 foot square.
If that big even.
If that big,
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah.
What we're proposing is roughly 12 feet by whatever the size you want. So it could be 12 by 100.
Yeah. Lots of root space, lots of places to sit on there on benches or have picnic tables or talk, or it'd be really unique addition to the downtown. And the question about the utilities is good. I believe your utilities are buried in town. I know your sewer is right down the middle of the street, so you would have to, of course, coordinate with buried utilities. That's always a case, always an issue. So those would have to be marked and noted where the buried utilities are in terms of any sort of electric or water lines or gas service or electric service. But that's not a difficult thing to overcome. You map those out and you work around and plant around it. So the utilities are always a concern, but we're not saying move utilities. We're not saying move curbs. Don't do anything expensive like that. Work with what you have. And what you have is a great main street. You have existing curbs. It all functions. You have on-street parking. You have all these great things. But what I like to see around here, and I'm from Maine, so I don't feel like I'm that far away, is that you have this great ecosystem around you and this great history. And that's sort of something that's missing. Bring that in. That's like a missing component to the mix you can add to your wonderful downtown.
It looks like someone else has a question.
I was going to say Mary Alice had some comments.
yes.
And somebody needs to put their speaker on.
Yeah, and mine are going to kind of go along with what Brittany and Celeste also had put in. I just want to make a comment, as I can still vividly remember the first time that I came into Millinocket, and I had bought a home there, and I turned on to Penobscot. Well, I had already gotten the feeling before then, but I turned on to Penobscot. I lived in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I was like, I have more green space in my main street than here. I mean, it was shocking. So I can't say enough about green. And you know, I'm not sure about trees. I do know, both from an urban and from living in in other rural areas, small towns, pocket parks are a really nice way to begin testing out, because you can get a lot of green. You don't have to worry about big trees, but you can get a lot of green, you can get height, you can get all kinds of things. And then in the winter, you can plow. Because one things that I know is that plowing is a very get it done thing versus subtle movements. And so I really liked the ideas of pocket parks. And I love pedestrian. I've lived places where they've stopped traffic and made pedestrian, and the process for that to be prosperous for the businesses was not short term. It was long-term stretch, because people were just used to having some place that they pulled up to and got out and walked in. And it didn't matter if it was 25 more steps. So I think that's something really important here, but that's also where pocket parks and beginning to move things a little bit could help. But these are great ideas. Thank you.
Say it again.
The one-sided, sorry about that again with the muting. The one-way would have parallel parking on both sides of it. It would just convert one side from angled parking to parallel. So one thing to keep in mind is that when you convert from angled to parallel, you're going to lose roughly 1/3 of your parking count overall, but then that gains you the width to create those linear park systems that we were referring to.
Actually, I think every scheme we looked at has parking.
Yeah, every scheme we looked at had parking on both sides.
Sometimes it's staggered.
Sometimes it's staggered. Sometimes it's, you know, missing in a section, but it's always there.
It's always
yeah.
on both sides. We don't
None of these schemes have eliminating parking completely on any side.
And then Brittany had a comment about movable planters. I don't know if she wants to elaborate on that.
They're great for short
Brittany?
term.
Yeah.
Oh,
They're great short term, but in the long term, so.
Do you want to ask her?
Hey.
Yeah, just that I know that I've heard in the past when people have talked about putting more green space downtown, that it would be more beneficial if there were like large movable planters, because plowing is obviously a big thing during the winters here. So maybe not like large trees, but smaller green space that can be moved around when needed.
It definitely helps to tie into the idea that anything we propose has this idea of being temporary. So I think that would definitely be a good way to even get 8 or 10 of these planters and try it out for 1 or 2 of the blocks of downtown, and then just see how it works. And maybe, you decide, oh, the planters aren't doing so well on this side of the street. Let's try the other side. Or, this restaurant really needs a little bit more parking than the library does. Let's move this down. So I think definitely that would be a good kind of short-term, low-hanging fruit phase 1 way to implement some of these ideas. Definitely.
And I can say something just about plowing through your microphone. I'm shouting across about the plowing. We've probably worked in our office, maybe, I don't know, maybe 100 different main streets. We always have to deal with, fire and rescue, public works and plowing. It's always a critical part of that. Sometimes, like on these schemes, these diagrams are relatively straightforward, and plowing is actually going to be pretty easy. And actually, even these little wooded areas, landscaped areas, you can just dump snow into those.
Yeah, they would actually act as snow storage spaces.
Yeah, so plowing is something that's always in the front of our mind as we're looking at these main streets, because we know that they really want to get in there, clean it out, make it so you can park, so people can get to their businesses. Sometimes there's some learning curve with new designs, but really, that's a great comment about plowing. As mundane as that seems, it's like so essential to making a downtown work, through the winter months. My office, and I live right on a main street, and so I am very attuned to plowing issues and when does the plow come and when are people going to be able to get into my storefront. So that's something because I live with that daily. We very much hear you on that one. Thanks.
Yeah. All right, if there's no more questions, I'm going to kind of dive in. Oh.
Susan asked, how would you integrate Heritage Park access into any of the schemes? So,
at the end?
Yeah, at the corner of Central.
Definitely.
Oh, the corner.
Yeah.
Well, we can say that's a huge part of what we're looking at tomorrow is that intersection.
Yeah. Yeah, so one of the things that we're going to be looking at tomorrow in a much bigger way is how to create a gateway, which is Heritage Park, as you're mentioning. So right now, we're kind of more focused on traffic pattern to sort of lead what the design will be, because obviously what the gateway will be is heavily influenced by the traffic pattern of the people coming and going from that gateway. So it's sort of a non-answer, but we're trying to kind of understand what the program will be before we go into designing what that park space will be. So stay tuned, I guess, is my answer. And then was there any other comment? All right, well, so now for the kind of next stage of the meeting, in case I didn't really introduce myself earlier on because we just popped right into Mitchell, but my name's James Reynolds. I'm working with Insight Architecture. We do a lot of downtowns revitalization consulting out in Western New York. Just like Millinocket, I'm from a very small rural town, and similarly, when our industry closed up during, close to the 40s after the Erie Canal left Western New York and shut down, a lot of the small rural towns just became filled with blight. The populations left, and we had very similar problems to Millinocket. And my firm has like a long track record of kind of helping all of these communities with their building renovations and pursuing historic tax credits and things like that. So I've walked this walk and I've talked this talk quite a bit. I have a lot of varied toolkits in my tool belt, I guess you could say, that I could pull out to kind of help you guys out. But for this part of the meeting, we're going to kind of dive deeper into a lot of the commentary that you guys gave earlier today at the in-person session. And we're going to go along the streetscape elevations of the buildings. And I'm going to just kind of probe you guys and question you guys to sort of dive in a little deeper into your comments. So if you guys are all able to talk while I'm doing this, it'd be much easier. So can we unmute everybody?
Except us.
Except
the chat or?
Yeah.
No, should they chat or do you want everyone speaking on that?
It might be better if everyone's speaking and they can unmute themselves, kind of thing. All right, so while we're going through this, think of it as just like a group conversation. So I'm just gonna prompt you guys with questions. You guys just chat openly, unmute yourselves instead of us being authoritarian and muting you. and we'll just kind of go from there.
Is your speaker on? We have one speaker on?
I'm keeping mine off.
I got mine on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
great.
you're fine. You stay on.
All right. All right. So this looks familiar, right? It's the streetscape elevations that we were all doing comments on. So what I'm going to do is kind of doodle and annotate sort of ideas and visions that'll help me later when I do the final drawing. So this is just to get all of your kind of ideas on paper a little bit more accurately, start to fuss and fine tune details, materials, windows, what would be cool here, what would stink here, what's good, what's not good. So just be ready for a barrage of questioning. So it looks like on your guys' comments, you guys love, 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 love this area right here in the park. So you guys have a lot of great ideas for kind of what could be going there. I'm seeing things like outdoor dining space, landscaping and pavers around the gazebos, a splash park. That's kind of a cool idea. I've done one of those before. Place for children, park improvements. I guess one question I have for you guys is, what do you guys currently use this park for? What is the programming now? And do you guys think that that programming could kind of overflow into other parts of the downtown? Should it stay put? Just kind of, what are your thoughts on this?
It's where the Trails End Festival was held before COVID. It's where they have some great concerts.
Okay.
In the winter time, it's decorated with lights and a tree in there. I think there's a tree in there. Right, Jane?
Yeah, it's used for community events, like Susan had said, whether the Trails End Festival, 4th of July. I know Peter's on here from the chamber. Anything when we have a community event, that's sort of like the central location downtown or destination, and vendors set up. So yeah, it's part of our community center.
But I mean, one of the other things is that it's incredibly underutilized most of the time.
Okay.
I mean, it's a gazebo with a bunch of asphalt around it.
Yeah.
Separated from the park. So, you know, it's not very inviting.
Whenever.
Yeah, side forest over on that side, that you would go through the side forest to enter the park. I can see you drawing in some more trees, but where you have your side forest on the roadway, if you could walk through there, that would be neat.
Right. It would help to link the park back into the main street a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah, so is this place currently kind of used as a parking lot when there's no event? And then when there's an event, they just close it off to parking and use it as like vendor stands and things like that? It's sort of like your plaza? Plaza.
Plaza? Jane, I don't think for the Trails End, you can still park there, can you? Or
No, I think they close it off and they set up vendors or, you know, chamber, there's different sort of booths, and yeah, they close it off for parking in there by the gazebo, because there's usually gazebo for, like you said, concerts or PA system and that sort of thing. So
and food carts. There's food carts in there, that's right.
Yeah, this morning I had some
In that park.
There is?
People do park there and use the Wi-Fi.
So there's
Oh,
free
that's really
Wi-Fi
cool,
in this
actually.
park. It sounds like there are people parking there to use the Wi-Fi.
Which is an important resource.
It also doesn't show the Scudic put in a nice new outside space, and before COVID they put that in, didn't they? Yeah, they did that before COVID even. So there's nice picnic tables and everything, if you remember. It's not showing up on here. So there's an outside space looking over towards the park that looks nice.
Yeah. Okay. So
Question about just a kind of a nerdy question about concerts, but how big are we really getting with this gazebo? And is there any desire, is there ever been a chance where like, oh, we really wanted to have a bigger show, but the gazebo was too small?
That was something I put on for at least the Heritage Park. Is in Fort Kent, they have a pavilion, and it's really large enough to have underneath, you know, concerts and things like that. So if there's a concert here and it's raining out, it pretty much gets canceled because everybody else is out in the rain, except for the band, unless they set up tents and things. So, but I don't know how historical or loved the gazebo is. Like, I think, but a pavilion or something else would be nice, and that could be at the other end. That could be up at the Heritage Park too. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll speak to that for a second as well. So as the chamber director, we, and a fairly new one at that, we run probably the more attended festival at that gazebo in Millinocket, the Trails End Festival. And it was something that was starting to lower in attendance with the amount of people, the acts, the weather really hit the event bad the past couple of years. But it's something we were also looking at really putting some force behind to bring to bring more attractive acts, higher level things that would flow into bringing a lot more people to the event in the area too. This would have been the first year of me doing anything involved with that, and it was canceled because it would have been last weekend. But moving into the future, that weekend in September with the Trails End Festival is promising to grow and be more substantial. As a performer and musician, the gazebo is painful to play in.
Good to know.
Good feedback.
Yeah.
And that is where I would very strongly echo Susan's suggestion of a new performance venue, more performance friendly. We're not performing in barbershop quartets like we were in the 40s and the 50s, and the acts that we bring to perform there are bigger than that concrete shell can really do well for.
Okay. That's all really good feedback. I'm gonna just keep rolling because I bet we could stick on one building for the whole night. So we'll just rolling down the road. So we're at the first building. This building looked pretty loved. It had a lot of stickers on it that said character, and it said good design and appealing to the eye, and outdoor dining space next to park. Yes, that's a huge amenity. Definitely something that when you're turning, not on the north, making that left turn, but when you're coming from the south, making that right turn, it's definitely a very nice and inviting thing to pull you in until you realize it's a one way pretty quick. But it's definitely an inviting thing. You got this big yellow facade. It's really bright and vibrant. You see people enjoying things outside. There are tables and umbrellas, all very good things. And honestly, I think we should keep that in mind. I wish it was in this picture. But those kind of little streetscape elements can really make or break what a downtown looks and feels like. And it's one reason why we're really focusing so hard on streetscape and trying to encourage more of that. So as we're going down these facades, let's just think about low-hanging fruit. Let's think about what's giving it character, right? Because many people thought so. So I'm definitely going to want to ask you guys, what elements of this do you think give it the character that you like and is desirable for Millinocket? But as we're going, I want you to also think, what could make this building better? And think about low-hanging fruit like signage, paint, small detailing, window sizes, materiality. Just kind of look at it with those in mind, and then
the forest out front, like landscaping,
right?
Green, something green there, something more natural. That's. I mean, I love the color, and I love the awnings are really nice. They're well done. Like I like that. All that.
I think a good point to bring up is the direction of the signage. If it were perpendicular with the street, more visibility, and people would be more aware of what was coming up, and before they got on top of it.
Well, let's dissect this building's signage, Jen. Like let's get nerdy with it. So right now on this drawing, right, they have a wall sign here. and then they have a window and a door sign. And the window sign, it's not really a window sign, it's a pizza light, so let's not even count that. So as somebody who's just looking at this facade for the first time, you're just pulling in, you're getting out of your car, you're looking at it. The sign on the wall, it has very little relationship with the front door. It's a little misleading, right? I mean, this is the sign for the building. You might think, oh, is this the only piece? Just this low part? Because it's the only piece with a wall sign. So if I were doing a signage assessment for this, I would probably say, maybe look into a new wall sign and maybe even a perpendicular sign like you were making note of, right? If a perpendicular sign came out right over the door, now pedestrians are walking by, they see it at that 90-degree angle. Yep, two sides. Maybe even put lights on it if you really want to get fancy. You know, you guys aren't open after 6 anyway, so maybe not. But
they're open.
8. They're 8.
That's
8.
That's the local watering hole.
8.
Okay. But that's one thing. And then another thing is like, how does the color scheme look? Do you guys think that this yellow and green match nicely with the stone veneer on the lower part? It's not terrible.
I think that it works better than some other spots on the street. I think the matching cohesive thing, all of the little sticky notes from earlier that had the word cohesive on them were mine. The matching theme going down.
Except for split heat.
Why didn't they do the green awnings on the two roundy, the awnings over the doorways?
Yeah.
Clamshells down there.
Is this structure is anyway, but is this another doorway?
Yeah, I don't think it's used though. Wait, oh no, can you go in both ways, Jane?
So I think they have special events. I think they have it renovated now. I think maybe when this picture was taken, they were still doing renovation. And this is fair for us, you know, locals. It's like exciting. It's one of the better looking places downtown because I don't know if it's been the last 2 or 3 years that it did get a facelift. So I think for us locals, it's like, yep, that looks like that's pretty good looking for us.
All right. Well, I'll start posting this part then. Let's just keep scrolling through the.
Can I jump in on that really quick? I think if anything, they need to carry that yellow all the way down and remove the rock facade, or vice versa, because for me, like I live here and I'm from the region, but it looks like 2 different storefronts personally. So it is a little bit confusing. So I just think pick one or the other.
I'm with you. From a historic standpoint, all of the buildings in Millinocket were wood buildings. You guys built your whole town off the industry of wood. And you're not fooling anyone with the stone veneer, because when you turn the corner, it's not there anymore. So clearly the first floor is not made of stone. So I tend to agree with you too. If it were to pursue historic tax credits or anything of that nature, it would have to conform to the Secretary standards, and it would probably need to get rid of that veneer, yes. So it's a good point to be made, is that in the future, depending on the funding sources that you go after as a town, you may need to actually think about historic preservation in those things, because they can help subsidize your project costs. And when it's hard to scrape any money together, sometimes you need those tax credits to even make a project cash flow. So I'm glad you brought up that point on materiality. I think that's an important thing to keep in mind.
It's not a long time to tell your first slide. Your LLC.
I'll get there.
Yeah.
All right, so as we're going down, let's go to this low slung property here, the Memories of Maine Gallery. So it said good location for retail. Bricks have a great,
There's no stick.
remove a few eyesores and we're on the way. A food court and potential. So who sees what is some potential? Anybody kind of, whoever did that sticker, what's some potential people are kind of seeing in this lower building? What do they think is working there? It has awnings, it has large windows, so it's easy to see in and out. So that's good for a storefront. It kind of has all the right kind of pieces.
It needs a facade.
Hmm?
It needs a facade. of some sort.
You have a bit more height.
A little
to bring
more.
it in.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe a little parapet or something.
Yeah.
And maybe some more prominent signage. To me, the sign is a little thin. You know, the lettering is a little thin. It's just illegible. Definitely also an opportunity for even having like some additional signage, like a perpendicular sign. Honestly, I could see perpendicular signs up and down your whole main street. I mean, there's a couple great examples that we'll get to as we keep scrolling down, but one in particular had like this whole forest scene cut in a laser on a piece of steel with a moose on it. It was pretty incredible. Okay. Here we've got this kind of nice building. It got pretty good review by everybody at the open house today, right? We've got character, and potential. So what are some things about this that are character or have a lot of character to them, right? You've got, it's a wood building and it has wood siding, or at least something that appears to be kind of woodish, which is good, right? That kind of speaks to the materiality of the building overall, holistically. The storefront's a little funky, right? It looks like there's no door, so it looks like historically there probably was, you know, an entry point here with a door and
It's on the right. The doorway, KGH, it's over there on the right.
I'm glad you're going to say that.
The door's way over there. Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I didn't do that.
It is weird, you're right.
Okay.
They moved it.
Gotcha. It's probably because there was a bunch of steps in the front and they needed to meet code, right? So they have a ramp up there.
I don't really remember. Anybody? Can't remember. We just walked by it.
That's funky.
The middle one went up to the apartment, and the two on the sides went to the side stores.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Instead, there's a hallway now on the right, I think. I remember entrances to everything that way.
Okay. Gotcha.
I believe. I don't really know how you get to the apartments. Let's see.
And it's clearly
Yeah,
residential. but-
it's one of the few properties in town that has upper floor residential, right?
Floor.
Even just the ability, and 3 floors is nice.
A nice open space. It was opened all up inside in the downstairs floor and was started to be used a little bit for some meetings and things like that. Like, I don't know how many years ago, 4 or 5 years ago.
Oh, it has a commercial kitchen. Okay, that's a very big opportunity. Where that's one of the huge costs for a new business to do a build out in a location to set up shop. So it definitely is a good amenity to have there to kind of get another restaurant to take its place. It's a good.
They could use some shutters or another color or something maybe, or even white shutters or something, and some landscaping. Green.
There's also a large warehouse garage sort of space in the rear of this building with street access. So that opens up potential to a whole other sort of clientele. I mean, it was a furniture store for a long time. And those apartment spaces up top have so much potential. I've been up there a few times. There's so much that could be done up there.
One thing I will note to that point on upper floor apartments, I do a lot of upper floor apartment conversions in historic buildings, and I will say that building code changes over time. The things that were permitted to be built when your town was built probably are no longer legal, right? How many times have you gone up a 10 to 12 inch step in an old building and almost tripped and said, man, why did they do this? Well, you can't, it's hard to redo that kind of stuff. One thing about building code is that every single apartment needs to have a window for their bedroom. And sometimes the locations of windows in an existing building can lead to some really funky floor plans because it's hard to, get all the windows in the right location. So this building has windows in spades up top, which means that you'll be able to have nice layouts in the interior, get higher rents, make it's just everyone's been in a bad layout apartment, and it's hard to get a good return on investment when your floor plan's funky and barely meets code. So windows in some ways are a huge thing for a building to still have. So we should just try to hang on to those windows when we can. Here is one of the, in my opinion, strongest buildings downtown. It's clearly had a lot of investment put into it. It's 2 stories, it's brick, has a lovely facade, has a good color scheme, has all the right pieces, right? It's got perpendicular signage, big, open, transparent windows. It even has transom windows up top because, you know, a little light is not enough. You need a whole bunch, and it can help you save a little energy. And another thing to note is that up top, right, they have full-size windows, right? They didn't put a tiny little vinyl window in and put, you know, clapboard siding around it to fill up that hole. They put full-size windows in. So whenever we're continuing to look down the streetscape, just think to yourself, where are there full-size windows and where are we looking at tiny windows in a full-size windows place? Just kind of be thinking about that as we're going. All right, so let's facade. It's got structured awning. It's in decent shape. It's clean. It's well maintained. Nothing's falling off of it. But what's it missing? Anybody?
It looks like it's missing half the building, or a third of the building. Is that weird?
It could.
You know what I mean? It looks like a third of the building on the left side is missing for some reason. I don't know what, or it needs a facade on the lower side, up in the front. Something. It's weird.
Tall building and then the taller building and combine them over time.
I can see that here, yeah.
So like the left-hand side is just a lower building.
Gotcha, gotcha. So to your point, because it was two separate buildings historically, and then the first floor. Yeah. But
yeah.
If you were to do a facade renovation, there's nothing saying that you couldn't create, you know, just a little column right here, and then paint one side one color and the other side a different color, and kind of respect the historical fact that it was two buildings, but you could still have the interior be connected. That doesn't hurt anybody's feelings. The other thing that is missing here, in my opinion, is signage. I'm looking at this building. I don't know what is in it, but I do know that it's open. That's a little confusing.
That's true. I mean,
what is this location? Is this a liquor store? Does it sell tchotchkes? What are we talking about here?
Medical cannabis. It's called Roots to Remedies. They've actually, this is a fairly old photo of
nice. That's what oh no, it's the whole
there's some signage, but you know, not perpendicular, and they've actually moved to the bottom of the next door down. So.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Same people.
But one thing that I think the point still stands, though, that signage is absent from this facade, and because they have a structured awning, there are some possibilities, right? They could do a little fixed sign on the edge of the structured awning. I've seen that be done before, and then they can put little lights on it. I've seen it where they say, hey, structured awnings, those are not historical in any way. Let's rip that thing off, put a fabric awning on because it looks much better. And we can take it in or out depending on the time of year and usage. And then we could put just a flat wall sign because now we have all this extra space it was absent when there was a structured awning. Do you guys think that these shutters probably operate?
No.
No. And these ones look a little funny because if they were closed, they would only cover half the window, right?
Yeah.
Hi, James. I would like to comment on the shutters. I think the shutters could really go, and it's a comment that actually goes back to the beige building a few doors down, which I think has got some sort of faux shingle siding.
Yeah.
It's like a fake shingle, vinyl. But my comment would be is if, I don't know if there's ever going to be any money or if maybe new owners or people will, you know, eventually be able to invest in things like that. But vinyl siding just looks residential. And that's what it makes this building look residential. It makes the beige building look residential. I think the vinyl siding could really be lost all along Main Street, really.
It harkens back to that comment earlier about the Secretary for Interior Standards. Like when you're pursuing historic tax credits, the first rule is no vinyl anything, right? It's not a thing. Vinyl has, you know, the appearance of, oh, it's replacing a wood product, but it's really not, right? You can't maintain it like a wood product or, you know, wood-like product. Even fiber cement, right? You can repair it, you can repaint it. It looks effectively like wood, and you can get it in profiles that look exactly like, you know, shiplap siding or any kind of siding that you could have had with wood. Yeah, but vinyl, on the other hand, it always kind of looks cheap. You're always getting some contractor to do it for as cheap as possible. They always cut corners. It's just it's never the best product to use. So I agree with you. It would be lovely to see in future renovations removing vinyl, so that way it would allow you to have more effective material usage on Main Street. Because imagine if you're stuck with white vinyl siding, you're just going to have white vinyl until the vinyl's defective and you replace it. You can't do anything else. But if you have wood or any other kind of fiber cement siding, you could repaint it every year. You could have a new tenant come and go and change the paint color scheme based on their branding. It just opens up a lot more possibilities than being stuck with the white plastic that for the next 20 years.
To address the fixed awning there, I understand that a cloth one would look better, but you have to remember how much heavy wet snow you get every year, and what they did that for was a reason, so that they didn't have to be constantly shoveling off or worrying about ice right in their doorstep right there. And that's kind of a traditional kind of look, or what they would do. It's practicality. Does that make sense? So whereas cotton, I think Tim's on this call, but they had to replace the one down with they did it with cloth or whatever down at the National Monument office or visitor center down there. And it's just not quite as practical as the fixed. So if there was a way to make them aesthetically pleasing, incorporated into the design.
And I would say in the scale of terrible to decent structured awnings, this is on the decent end of the scale. I've seen the ones with like shingles on a brick building that make 0 sense. So this isn't doing anything that big of a faux pas. Well taken. Your point's well taken, though. Yeah, there's a level of practicality involved here.
Changing the vinyl siding, I think, and getting rid of those chintzy little shutters would make all the difference in the world. I feel like maybe a different color.
They were replaced with real shutters, or at least fake ones that were wide enough to look like real. All right, let's keep going. So here we have a brick building, right? One of the
yellow.
Angelos.
So this building is kind of interesting because if you look, you have what is obviously a 2-story masonry building, but it has these large sections of what looks like vinyl siding in these missing pieces, right? So it kind of makes your mind question, like, I wonder what was there at one point. Typically, there would be a cute little cornice here that would provide some level of intricate wood detailing and a little bit of depth to the facade. And then these storefront windows probably would have gone all the way to the top with a little transom or just been full pane glass. And then the door upstairs would have had a little window above it to allow light naturally into the stairwell so that the tenants have no problem tripping on their feet. And so here you basically have seen a facade that it's not terrible. It's got lighting and signage. It has all of the things, but it may not have implemented them in the most historically sensitive way.
What's that corner?
Yeah, so and it also has a cornice. So clearly there was probably some kind of detailed cornice up top that either due to, falling out of maintenance schedule, it just became in disrepair. So I've seen they take off the cornice and cap the top with something, that doesn't quite match the rest of the building. So this would be a good example of, a big area for opportunity to kind of redo the facade in a way that would help it to kind of match its historic intent, right? To be a masonry building, to have big window openings, to have a, light going into it.
It looks like on the corner there's granite.
Yeah, it looks like around the corner, all of the windows have granite sills and lintels. So that could be kind of a detail to pull from for the new elements. And maybe you don't literally replace with granite because we know that's super expensive, but granite has a nice gray color. Maybe you use some wood paneling and paint it gray. So you're kind of creating a cohesive renovation that while it's not trying to replicate the past, it at least draws some level of inspiration from the past. Any thoughts on that kind of idea?
I like the mixture of brick built. We go back and forth here. There's such a nice variety, I think, that if it's done right, it makes a more interesting town.
Well, this whole building's masonry.
Yeah, this whole building's masonry. So it makes sense in this particular instance to really go all in on the masonry angle.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Oh, in general.
Yeah, but I mean, like, then you have the other, you know, you have a clapboard building, and then you have this all brick like this with the granite and everything. Although the little windows on their side are strange, aren't they?
Yeah, it looks like there were full-size windows at one point that were filled in.
Yeah.
Evidence because the lintels are still there. You can see I'm circling them.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yep.
That was all fenestrated.
Interesting.
Now that we're, you know, I think the two buildings on the corner here are actually very important for the lookbook because they show kind of two very different styles of buildings, but show, you know, a lot of opportunity for new treatments to kind of illustrate those. So here we are, we've got the big forehead building, I like to call it. No windows up top, which as I mentioned earlier is gonna mean that the upper floor apartments, if there are any, probably have the strangest layouts possible. You know, it might mean that you can only fit 2 in instead of 4 or something like that. So right off the cuff, I can say vinyl siding, gotta go. No windows on the front, gotta go. You know, that's just, it's too silly. I mean, unless you guys really like having a projection surface in town forever, I would probably say find a new projection screen and put some windows in.
Do you think there's windows under there that they just covered them over?
I 100% would stake my reputation on it. Yeah, I was looking through a book that was done by the Historical Society here in 1973, and I saw a bunch of pictures of the old downtown, and this definitely upstairs.
That would be neat to see if you could plug some of those into these designs, like.
Yeah, show some of the historic intent and then how like a new proposed design reflects on that historic intent.
Were there trees down the street then, like every other street in Maine?
Though the aerial photo I saw showing downtown Millinocket when it was made had 0 trees. I guess they were just like, log it all, but you know.
It's funny.
So yeah, I mean, when you're looking at this, it's not just the stairs that I want to point out. It's actually the whole facade treatments, just rather blah. I mean, look at this guy, right? His head height is right. Wall height. If it will stop moving on me. Come on. His head height right here. This wall is higher than his head height.
Yeah.
So that means that even though there's windows, no one can see your goods or services, right? They have to put the one shirt they can fit in here up on a little pedestal here. It's just not super helpful for a retail environment on Main Street to have its back to Main Street, right? The only way to see in is just here. So that would be something that could be definitely changed, is just to bring this height of this wall down lower and to include more window fenestration. And then while you're at it, this building has an original cornice. It has these cute little molding patterns here. So I would imagine this big, boring, flat surface might look a little nicer with just a little bit of depth here to break up the top and bottom. And while you're here, now you have, you know, space for signage. You could put the name of this shop here. You could have some some lights. It's starting to look like a Main Street all of a sudden. Then, you know, you can kind of line up the window fenestration with the upper floor, and that can kind of inform where the window placement is. So everything, again, looks cohesive, because that's a very important thing to have, cohesive streetscape. Here we've got something that's just going to be demoed. So does anybody have any gut feelings for what the form of what's going to go in there should be like? Because this gives us an opportunity as a town to just come up with a cool sketch of what we'd like to see infill look like in the future. Any thoughts on that?
One thought is, and if they're like shipping containers, it doesn't have to be in this exact location. Like there's like a big pad where the bowling alley fell in too.
Yeah.
But there's a shop in Brewer, Maine, like an hour down the road, that retrofits shipping containers. So the front can all be retail and then the back can be your warehouse or your processing or whatever. But you know, you can have up seating, up top. We'd love to hear your thoughts on sort of like what that might look like for infill spaces.
They just put some of those on Washington Avenue.
Okay.
Well, that's a good point to be made.
We'd love your thoughts on like
Whenever you're building a new building, it's important to remember that right now it's 2020. Building costs for new construction have never been higher in the history of the United States. So with that in mind, every time you build something, you have to think like. So the new forms that buildings tend to take when you let a developer just do whatever they want to do is they'd like to maximize the amount of, right? So that means they want to build it as tall as possible, as dense as possible, with as many units as possible. You guys don't have any zoning here. So you have to start thinking, oh, they do?
Yes, yes.
I misspoke.
We're
Downtown.
downtown.
There's a
That doesn't
downtown.
have zoning. Millinocket does.
Okay,
Yeah.
my mistake. I misheard something earlier and got my wires crossed. You do have zoning.
Downtown commercial zone.
Gotcha. Well, so with that said, they're going to try to maximize their profit. So they're going to try to make as many units as possible. So density is typically what they're doing. So it's kind of an opportunity to think, what would something that's a little bigger look like? And how big is too big? How big is just big enough, right? It's very narrow. You guys have a couple, I think you have what? One 3-story building in your whole downtown, and then the rest are just 2- and 1-story buildings. So, you know, I could see a 3-story building maybe fitting in, but would 4 or 5 be too much?
Yeah.
You know what might be interesting is if I really like the charm of these little buildings, and it really draws your eye in. You want to sort of you want to go wandering back there and see what's back there. Even if you had to do a 3-story building, wouldn't it be interesting if it were like a U-shaped building, so that it was open in the middle, and it would have like a corridor or pedestrian area and maybe little shops around an open center, and so the building is literally the shape of a U, or there's sort of some kind of meandering through it. I just think it's totally charming, even though it's also totally dilapidated.
I think you're right. There's something about the massing, right? How
Yes, yeah.
there's solid and void relationships going on. There's courtyard relationships going on, alleyways.
Exactly.
It's kind of like, what's the part of the fun of Millinocket, the joy is walking through all these crazy little meandering like side streets and things like that. So finding a way to incorporate that into new development, totally a good idea, definitely.
Well, and it starts to create a little bit of a charm that it has been missing because of the, and it's not just Millinocket, it's, you know, whatever, urban renewal in the 1970s where everything was converted to driving, where downtowns became driving destinations, and then you lost downtowns. But how do you then reconnect to a walkable, you know, area that what's now being sought out, especially in the age of COVID? But I like what you're doing. I think creating a shape so it's not just massed building right to the street, where there's actually some interaction in landscaping and shape to where it creates a charm in the lot.
And it also provides rear access points as well, right? When you have everything pushed to the front, it becomes your only point of access. But when you allow those little meandering side paths to occur, suddenly you can have residential entries in the rear. So people aren't walking right out onto Main Street. They could be walking to their parking spot in the back. And it kind of helps create a better list of amenities for those future tenants. So that's good feedback. The other thing is, you know, it's highly likely that any new development that occurs will probably have to address the shortage of rental housing in the area. So apartments is definitely something that is beneficial to a downtown's revitalization. Everywhere I've ever worked, the first thing that we do is try to renovate as many upper floor apartments as we can to meet code and get online. Because whenever you are going from blight to kind of being revitalization, and again, it takes 10 years, you know, this is a long-term goal, but during that path up and out of that kind of blighted, depressed state, you're gonna have a lot of commercial turnover. But when you have an apartment demand, that's what's gonna pay your bills, because those upper floor apartments generate much more than a kind of, you know, speculative commercial market that hasn't quite seen the proof yet. The other thing is they feed one another, right? Upper floor apartments that are market rate get working professionals that are looking for an authentic sense of place where they live. They don't maybe want a single family house that's too big and old to maintain. Maybe they don't have the money for it, but they do want to rent somewhere where they can go walking around and get a cafe, go to a cafe, and really feel like they're living within a community. And so the best part about all these upper floor apartments is that they're your new patrons. They're the ones that are spending more money and creating new tax revenue within in Millinocket. And that in turn just gets reinvested into public spaces. So it's all kind of working together, right? You want to build more tax revenue. You want to have more patrons to all of these restaurants. You want to have new space that actually, you know, pays for itself over a reasonable time frame.
I think the challenge in Millinocket, I mean, we have a rental unit, and finding residential tenants that have work and don't smoke is not, I mean, it's different than it's very different than Bangor or Portland or other parts of the state. I mean, it's a community where there are people who have employment challenges, you know, and so it does not make it easy to necessarily rent, even if you create the market, the apartment. I don't know. That's been our experience.
Do you find that the people that you are able to rent to that have jobs that kind of finally kind of rise up to the top to do that, do you find that they typically work remotely? Maybe they're like freelance or gigsters, or is it they're working locally and there's just not a lot?
I don't know. I mean, we've only owned the building for a couple of years, but and mostly we've had Baxter State Park employees, but it just turned over right during COVID, and we had a challenging time finding a tenant that had income. It didn't have to be somebody that was working. It could be somebody disabled, but to find somebody that had income and wasn't a smoker, you know, it was challenging.
All right. I want to kind of keep moving along because we got about 30 minutes left. But I do want to point out that this building here seems to be the one building in Millinocket that has the most original storefront, like from a historic perspective. It's not maybe the best maintained. It could definitely use a good scrape and paint and some pieces of rotting wood replaced. But, and again, I'm just talking below that line. Upper floor, yeah, vinyl siding, yuck, needs to get rid of it. But the actual storefront windows are of reasonable size. There's still a transom window over the front door. The knee walls are short, so it allows somebody with a reasonable height to actually look inside the commercial space adequately. So whenever you guys get a chance and you walk by this building again, really take a good look at it with a fresh set of eyes. And you'll notice that there are all sorts of fun, intricate wood detailing that could be painted a nice 2 or 3 color scheme. And this whole building would just pop. And it would just be as simple as scraping and painting, and it would be very historically appropriate. So in this rare case, you have a very good opportunity to do something cost effective and historically sensitive. But again, it's still missing a couple key components. For instance, it would be wonderful to get a little bit more depth and differentiate the first floor from the second floor. So maybe a small cornice would be good. And then we're also thinking again about signage all the time. So, you know, I could see them putting a nice perpendicular sign maybe right over there near the corner, and then having a nice signboard zone right up above the cornice with some little lights. And just that kind of simple little changes, right? You're not blowing a whole lot of money on this, but it would just be that little cherry on top of the sundae to make it, you know, go from a 4 to a 10.
Would you recommend removing the side building?
You know, I don't want to recommend any demo until I can, you know, see it the structure myself, because it's just one of those things that I don't know enough information to make an informed statement on that. But I would say from an aesthetic point of view, if that's kind of what you're getting at, I think you could make that side building very cute.
Yeah. It kind of looks like an old grocery store, the way they used to come in from the side when they wanted to create a grocery store out of a house kind of thing. That's what it looks like to me.
And again, like the other case, right? The other building had the low piece and the main piece combined together as one building with the same siding. But this one took a different approach. They actually differentiated the two very obviously. So again, you could do something like paint the large portion of one color scheme and the small portion another color scheme to kind of differentiate them again and reflect that historic idea that they're two separate buildings. Living Innovations actually is doing everything pretty right. I mean, they have a very clear sign, a small building, can't really hide the, you know, the door, big windows. There's really not much to say on this one. It's got an okay color scheme. If I were gonna do anything to it, I would probably just invest in a carved sign with some gold leaf lettering. You know, just put that little cherry on top again. It's almost there. It just needs a little push. Now here we have a huge municipal parking area. There's been a lot of talk about, is it enough parking? Is it too much parking? Could there be something else here? Is it a good event space? I think we could probably have a decent, you know, 5 or 6, 10-minute discussion on just programming ideas for this. We've got trailhead bike parking, connections to the library. I'm assuming this is the library right back here?
No.
No?
No.
This one?
It's behind those other buildings in out back, I believe.
It's more of a stairway to the library, just a stairway to cut through that hill to get to the library. The library is maybe a street over, but it's
Kind of
it
like,
just needs a shortcut.
There's
okay,
railroad tracks out there.
gotcha. Okay. And then I also read pump course. Anybody want to talk about that?
Oh, that was me. I just said there should be an in-town we talked about putting it up by the school, but a place for the kids to ride bikes as short pump course, which is kind of fun to have in town while mom and dad are shopping or whatever, but we also talked about putting it with a skills course out by the new trails, closer to the trails.
But it is good to think about that if you have extra paved space that's being completely underutilized and you know that the town might not have enough business growth right now to warrant anybody making a big investment on new buildings, you have to start thinking, well, okay, what can some of these vacant spaces be used as? So when I see this parking lot, I think, there's people parking here. But when I keep thinking, oh, where's this, you know, vacant space at, I think the other side of the street where the bowling alley used to be, that giant blank concrete pad. It's like a blank slate for something. I could see that being an amazing pump track or a skills course. Or we're worried about mountain bikes, but what about skateboarders or any other kind of amenity? You know, you have to think about age groups and what kind of activities those age groups like to do. I know where I'm from, we're really focusing on the fact that none of our parks have, you know, teen activities, and they're worried about teens getting into trouble after school, but all of the parks have kiddie stuff. So we're working on building a pump track actually in Perry, a dirt mountain bike pump track. But it's all kind of baked into it. It's definitely something to consider. Was there anything else that anybody had any ideas for this parking lot other than the connection to the library and kind of thinking about pump tracks?
No, my thought was that it would be better to put the parking there and put your forest, like increase your forest. Maybe lose a whole bunch of parking spaces there, but have that forest.
Right, it's almost like a
sticker or something. I don't know.
I think that's a good comment, right? You have a parking lot and you have a nice wall of buildings on either side of it. So there's kind of a street edge that's created, and then it goes missing right there. So I think your point is well taken that maintaining that street edge could provide a better, more appealing pedestrian environment and screen an unappealing parking lot.
I like the woods behind it, almost cut face those borders in the front.
Yeah, it's almost like you're taking the woods behind it and pulling it to Main Street. You're saying, nah, we need you out here.
Yeah. And those are deciduous, whereas I guess what I'm envisioning, because you drew it, was conifers down the main street. So they're evergreens. It's not, I mean, you can intersperse like the pretty colored maples and things like that, but that's what I visualize, is seeing it green year round, because those are the woods of what we used to harvest and everything up here. So yeah. Softwood.
Yeah, it would definitely need to be a mix just for resiliency purposes. I know I'm on the tree board in Perry, and we try to plant a very resilient list of different types of species, because Like we found out recently through an arbor study, like 80% of our street trees were Norway maple. And if we get a blight, that means we lose 80% of our street trees all in one.
Yeah, yep.
You don't want to do that. So conifers, deciduous trees. Another thing to think of is when you have trees in the street, you're lowering the amount of sun that's hitting that hot pavement. So sometimes in the summer, that's great, right? You love the shade, you want to sit in it, you want to eat in it. But in the winter, when you get the blues, you need that vitamin D. You almost want deciduous trees that are going to drop their leaves. So that way, A, the storefronts behind the trees are getting light in the winter, and B, you're getting light in the winter when you're walking down the street. So just the reality of it is it would be a mixture of different species to provide a resilient, kind of foliage and infrastructure.
Shout out for larch.
Shout out for larch.
I love large.
Yeah,
Most people don't. They think it's ugly. I love it.
All right, we're rounding out almost to the end of the streetscape. Let's just keep going. Let's look at comments for this. We got nice windows for display, but needs some character. I like that comment. Can anyone care to elaborate on what kind of character they might like to see?
The shutters are wrong again.
I think it's the same kit of shutters from the other building. I think the same guy just cited half of the town. I think it's kind of interesting, the materiality on the storefront. It's like this really highly polished, kind of not super well maintained material. It's kind of dated. It reads very 50s.
Yeah.
But the proportions are right? The windows are good. The entry sequence is very clear. And it even provides like a little zone, right? Signage, so that's good. And it even has some depth. It has a cornice up top, has two very clear storefronts, and then a doorway up top. At least that's what it's reading like. So I think this really just needs maybe some new materiality for these storefronts, but maintain the same proportions, keep the same windows, and I maybe just add some new signage when you get a tenant.
When you say new materiality, you mean taking wood all the way down, or what do you?
That's a good question. I would not add stone or brick because it's very clearly a wood building. So my gut reaction would be try to use something that's either wood or is a wood replacement material that has similar characteristics and that it's dimensional, can be cut to size, it can be used as trim and things like that. So I would probably, if it were me, I would propose fiber cement. I would put fiber cement paneling, use a nice two-color scheme, very simple, clean details, something a little more contemporary.
Taller windows up top because it looks like they put a drop ceiling in and adds the ceiling. It looks like they added roof.
Replacing the transom.
Yeah, and replacing the transom, if they have a drop ceiling currently, it looks like in the shot. So they had to lower the head height of the window line. So an alternative could be, you could have, forget about the signboard there. You could just create taller windows, right? Taller door, taller windows, get more light in there. And then instead of having a signboard, because we're not, we don't have to follow the dogma. There's many different types of signage. You could do something great with these huge windows, like have window signage. That's easy to read, right? So that's just another kind of option for signage. There's window signage, there's door signage, there's wall signage, there's blade signage, there's iconic signage where you just have a cool shape like an ice cream cone, no words, stuff like that. So that's very popular in Portland, iconic signage. So let's just keep moving on. What about the up top? Anybody have any feelings about these windows? Are they taller?
I think that's what the drop ceiling might be.
But that would be expensive. What would you recommend if they were like, that's too expensive? Or it has, like you said, maybe a drop ceiling or something in there. What else could you suggest for that blank space up there? Signage or something?
It could just be a nice detail. For instance, if you were to take out all the vinyl siding and put up, some new siding, you could potentially make a break with it trimmed. So maybe the new siding has a piece that kind of goes across like that.
Right.
You trim that out. And then you could kind of bolster the cornice a little bit, right? So now it all kind of looks like a big hat on top and it reads less like a big forehead. There are a lot of simple ways that you can alternate the siding pattern to facilitate that kind of, eliminating that weird forehead. What about the brick guy next door with the 2 stories of green awnings? The green looks pretty nice with the brick. I mean, maybe
That's brand new. That was just done as we're replacing all the old awnings that were there. They had to
and pretty simple. What about signage? Is this thing missing signage? Does it need better signage?
It does. That's the National Monument Visitor Contact Center for Millinocket, and it should have something like, I guess, vertical or something like that. They put a signboard out, but yeah.
Oh, they put one of those little sandwich signs. Yeah.
It's a rental. I mean, it's rented space. So, and there's apartments upstairs, I believe.
Okay. Interesting.
It's an older building that could use some TLC, definitely, internally.
Yeah. And to me, it kind of reads like the top cap is a little too small, too thin. It looks like it just kind of doesn't have a proper ending to the building. So I could see maybe just having a slightly larger cornice, just, again, to make it read less flat. Because this is a very flat facade. Aside from the awnings, everything's pretty much, one plane. And the doors are pretty good, and the windows are good too, right? They're large, you can see into them. There's, again, one continuous materiality for the whole structure. Everything kind of makes sense. And then we have next door. The comments on this were affected. It has potential. That and the Millinocket Insurance Agency. So let's brainstorm on some potential. Do we like the roof line here? Do we think that it's kind of interesting, being the only little cowboy building in town?
If it wasn't made of vinyl.
Right.
Ugh. And the windows look like they've been dropped down or they fell down onto the roof line, onto the awning line there.
Look at the roof line behind it.
Yeah, it looks like this is actually like a gable roof. So behind it, you can see, yeah, so you can see that this is kind of stacked in order to hide the fact that it's just a simple gable end. Just in case anyone was wondering why they took that shape. But one way that you could cover it up easily, get rid of the vinyl siding, throw on some new fiber cement siding. You could make a trim pattern that has, a little bit of stepping here, kind of accentuates the form. So you're just working with what you have. You're not trying to hide it, but you just make it a little cuter. You can implement a two or three-way color scheme. So it's got some vibrant pops of color and nice base color for most of it. Windows, I would say make them a little taller, but if you're not going to replace them, then, I don't think that it's terrible. The size isn't terrible. It could be a little better, but
I think it seems like there's more forehead because they got rid of that.
Yeah, definitely.
Some sort of signage or something in that paragraph.
Ooh, that could be a good way to do it. Yeah, like if we could figure out the time that the building was made. Yeah, we could have like a 1941 or whatever. Maybe it's more like 1921.
I think if you got rid of that shingled overhang and had more of an overhang that were appropriate for a flat face building.
I think it's worth repeating that the cloth awnings are retractable or removable in the wintertime.
Yeah, so a cloth awning would be good in the wintertime, right? Because it's retractable. So in some ways, like if you know that there's going to be a big snowstorm, you just pull it in and get shoveling the next day. But there are definitely better materiality options for this shingled awning, right? Like you could, if you had to have a structured awning, you were just, I don't want to deal with the snow and I don't want to deal with the fabric and I'm not going to change my mind. That's fair. No one's holding you a gun to your head to do it. But the metal siding that was used on the other structured awning would be maybe a little bit more appropriate. Yeah. And then I think signage is a possibility here too, right? Again, this building doesn't have any really clear signage at all. Wall sign, perpendicular sign, both would be useful here. Window signage. And then there's Millinocket Insurance, right? It's a one-story masonry building, very clearly. But then it has this strange little hat on top of vinyl siding. So I think that probably is just covering up where a cornice used to be. But the cornices, oftentimes, due to poor maintenance, they're usually intricately carved wood. Those things just happen to rot a little bit. Suddenly the wall's leaking, and you just need to shore up the building quickly. You put vinyl over it, and it's good for 30 more years. You never have to worry about it again. This happens all the time, probably happened here. So again, a good opportunity to just create a little bit more depth for such a flat, small little building, to give it a little bit more oomph, is it needs a haircut, right? It needs something interesting about its face. So this would be a good opportunity for, again, a cornice to create a little bit of depth. It would also be good because it would provide, you know, a little bit of overhang over the windows and the doors, because it can protrude out a little bit, 6 inches, 10 inches, 18 inches. How much depth do you want? How much depth do you need? And then the signage there definitely has kind of like a vintage vibe to it. How do people feel about this sign?
Could be a little more classy.
A little more classy?
A little classier, but yeah, I like the old fashioned kind of hanging sign like that, but it's like the wrong font, or I don't know what it is.
It probably just needs, I feel like everyone would love it if someone just repainted it and it looked perfect. But I'm with you. Yeah, it's kind of like a step in the right direction, but it's just missing something. Okay. One thing that's really bugging me, because I'm a pretentious architect, is that the top of the window and the door just do not line up. I don't know why. I just can't stop looking at that one little detail.
So you got to put something over the door, ties it in.
Yeah, maybe just put a little piece of trim.
A little awning.
Yeah, there you go. You're learning.
I know.
All right, now we have another pretty good example, right? It's kind of got this cutesy barn characteristic. Maybe it's a little cheesy, but I'll let you guys say it. How do people feel about this building?
Does anybody know how it looked originally? Jane? You there?
All I know is they make it so much.
I can't remember it.
Yeah, it was recently light blue. It was painted over the mask that we bought.
Oh, it was the lodge.
Yeah.
Word on the street is that it used to be blue, and it was painted recently to match the AT Trail Lodge.
Oh, that was it. Yeah, something looks different about it, but I don't remember the woodworking, whatever the weird trim is up there at the top, or why.
Yeah, it kind of can't be. It's like Disney architecture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Gotcha. And it has a new black awning as well. Yeah.
Oh, I can't hear is that Lucy? I can't hear what she's saying.
Yeah, I'm the transcriber of all comments in this room.
Okay.
Okay, but there are a couple things I think it is doing right. It has a nice big perpendicular sign, at least in this photo. Right, that's good. And it's over the door, so it's kind of a clear entry point. The windows on the storefront are definitely oversized. I mean, just look at it for a second there. It definitely was probably a little different in the past.
Yeah, that's too bad.
Or yeah, undersized, I'm sorry, undersized.
I knew what he meant. And there is an awning there now, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. All right, what about Reed Agency? Here again, we have a pretty simple one-story masonry building, big forehead, and an awning, and a storefront. And the awning and storefront, they're matched. They got the same color. It's kind of cohesive, maybe a little dated. Thoughts?
1960s? 60s, 70s?
Yeah. A new awning and a perpendicular sign would go a long way, right? Imagine just going from this like structured, prefabricated 70s kind of look to maybe something a little elegant, like a retractable awning with some cute little stripes on it that match the red color of the agency. And then you think, oh, you look at all this forehead space we got. Why don't we put Reed up here and uplight it at night? And then now suddenly we've got this cute little facade that enhances Main Street and adds a little light and curb appeal. Simple.
I like it.
Here, I don't think we need to work too much because they're already quite hard.
But that's not what we're looking at yet, Lucy. I like the trees.
You would like, of course, we all like the trees.
I know. Are you really going to put those trees in, Lucy?
She doesn't know.
They're in the street.
They're in the
What about, wait a minute, go back. Can you go back to it? What happened to the upper deck?
Yeah, I mean, we're
The
entertaining
outside space.
the idea of doing something that you could like move with a forklift so that we could get rid of it in the winter for plowing. But we like the idea of having more pedestrian and bike friendly space integrated
I like that.
to connect to the green space next door.
So think of this rendering maybe not as the literal what's going to be in the streetscape, but more as like a vision plan. It's almost related to what we're doing now in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we'll just pretend the stones are wood.
And I like the bike racks and stuff.
Well, that does kind of bring us to a broader question about streetscape. Does everyone in the room have any feelings about bicycle and hiker amenities? Are there enough benches now? Should there be more bicycle racks now? Are the level of bicycle traffic kind of met with the existing stock of bike racks?
I think we're going to see an increase in the need for bike racks and bike spaces coming up with the new trails linking into town. I think that and benches will be good additions.
Yeah, just seating areas, kind of like you would have outside of your house, like a patio kind of thing, but something that makes it feel like anybody can stop there, or the people working there can come outside and sit at a table and have lunch or something. I'd like to get rid of the car, more of the cars even right there.
Okay. All right, let's just quickly get to the, I'm going to go all the way to the end corner because we've got 3 minutes. So this building is got one of the most potential stickers. I think it had like 9 or 10 potential stickers. So you guys clearly see the potential in this building. So do I. In fact, today I found out through historical image searching that there used to be a small 1-story piece on the side of this building that was demoed, probably to make that road, I don't know. But in the historical image, it was demoed. I got to take a peek at what this facade used to be historically, and it was wonderful.
Really?
Yeah, it had these cute little low knee walls that were all that were brick, and they had a cute little cap, and then they had these very, very large windows that went incredibly high. And it was just like this big yeah, there's the photo.
Oh.
Look at Lizzie's screen. So all the kids are in front of it. So I would just love to, you know, be able to, I would love to see that back, you know, just bigger windows, you know, cute little wood trim. You could redo the whole storefronts and do a double glazed glass so you get a better energy bill in the, in the winter time for the commercial tenant. So I think this is ripe with opportunity, even more so than maybe some of the other buildings, because like we were indicating in the streetscape portion, one of the key things that's missing for drawing traffic into Millinocket is that visual interest for making people do that left turn. And if this is right there, this is that visual interest. All signage that pulls people downtown could be mounted to the side of that building, just hanging out on the side like a perpendicular sign. You know, you could have a big Millinocket this way arrow, you know? There's just so much opportunity that this building could provide you, not only as a signboard, but also just as a historically integral piece of architecture that draws the interest, sets the tone for the entire streetscape. So if this is cute, people will assume the rest is cute, and then you got them.
What did the upstairs look like? In your historical picture, what was the second floor? Were the windows like that, or were they larger, or?
They were much larger, and there were more of them.
They weren't like, they were totally even.
Yeah, it looked like historically there were two larger windows here. And then it looked like there might have been like 2 more here. But the thing is, on the historic photo, we could only see this much of the facade.
Oh.
So it leaves a little bit to the imagination.
But so if that person that owns that building wanted to restore it historically, is there more funding because of that for that reason?
They're depending on grant opportunities. Yes, historic tax credits could be pursued if the grant were available for it. I'm not super keen on Maine's historic tax credit.
And there's even opportunities for design assistance.
But there are design assistance opportunities for people pursuing those tax credits. Yes.
Nice.
It could help subsidize the project depending on the grant award.
Great. That would be sometimes a motivator for someone who might not have the funding to put into the building.
Tax credits cover soft cost amount and retroactive if they are.
Yeah, the tax credits, Rob just mentioned that they cover soft costs as well. So you can actually help, pay the architect to get you through all of this rigmarole and process to get the credits. And what was the second point? I'm sorry.
I believe they can be retroactive as well if you're approved.
Yeah, and if they're retroactive, so you have to
apply.
Yeah, you can apply after you've done the work as long as the work is approved.
Well,
Nice.
So if you pay your architect to get you there, apply, you're approved, you can put that into your reimbursable cost. Yeah.
Right, just the soft costs.
Mhm. Interesting.
I know in New York State, that's pretty much all I do every day at work. But with Maine, the grant programs are obviously different, even though the federal funding requirements of the architecture is the same because they're using the same federal guidelines for historic preservation.
Mhm.
This building and space across the street, we know are very important for that.
Yeah, but we know that the building here and then the park space across the street are like basically the key integral parts of this intersection.
And that's what we're really interested from the Katahdin Tourism Partnership aspect is what would be the best use of funding and usage of that space, that heritage park? I mean, just as a park or is more? I mean,
Well,
what visions?
Yeah, I think you could mix with commercial, but one
That
thing
would
to
be
keep in
good.
mind is that, again, new commercial build out is incredibly expensive. Sometimes it's a lot easier and cheaper and and effectively more practical to use your existing building stock because you're not at capacity. You have vacant buildings, just use them.
And folks had
Oh.
mentioned the
But-
pavilion.
Oh yeah, but the pavilion, maybe that
Yeah.
could be located there.
We talked about a pavilion, but we also have brought up a couple times about what Greenville, Maine did was bring in like the Amish sheds in bright colors or something. And those are for artists and residents or artisans for
Yeah.
to use like a month at a time and try out a business, an incubator. You said the word incubator.
But-
Lucy's point about the shipping containers.
Yeah.
That could be a place for that.
The shipping containers that Lucy mentioned also could be a place for that. Yeah,
Yeah.
in Heritage Park.
Or Amish sheds.
Or
Amish
Amish
sheds.
Amish
Thank
sheds.
you.
Yeah,
Yes.
we're all in,
The Amish sheds would be a little more aesthetically
Well,
keeping with that area.
yeah.
I keep thinking to have the fire department flooded for a wintertime ice arena and have sheds there, selling stuff. Yeah.
Does anybody have any feelings about flooding it for ice skating and have a little wintertime arena with
I
sheds?
know people have mentioned that before. The problem that we found, at least up in Patton, was maintenance of that. They already have an ice skating rink over by the high school, I believe, for hockey and skating.
Oh,
So
okay.
there is one, but I think, yes, some kind of usage there in the winter, like, because we do a tree lighting ceremony and everything. We had, somebody donated a big tree last year we set up, and it's the only thing that's happened there so far. But I know that we'd like to plant something and continue that. But I think there's definitely things we could put in there for sure.
It's also good to mention that in a very unique way, downtown Millinocket has 2 parks for its bookends.
Yeah.
So it kind of helps strengthen this idea of an kind of an urban forest, a string of trees connecting these 2 larger parks and kind of creating that trail through the business corridor. I think that that's an opportunity that not a lot of downtowns will ever get. And I think, it's something to capitalize on for sure. Well, it looks like, yeah, we're at 7. We've got a lot of comments. I know we didn't get both sides of the streetscape, but you got to leave me some work to do. But I think from the commentary and just the discussion, we've generated a pretty decent idea of what this will look like and what the vision for Millinocket is. It sounds like it's really important to have an authentic experience that kind of capitalizes on what you have. Keep it feasible, keep it implementable, understand the financial constraints of the people in the area, make recommendations that could be funded through multiple future funding sources and grants. You know, that's why it's important to, even if you don't literally restore history, to just have a respect for it, because what you do might get historic tax credits someday, so you might want to do it right. Just things like that to keep in mind. It's not, you know, nothing we're doing is, no one's going to force you to do whatever we recommend. It's just to kind of illustrate the vision for Millinocket so that you can keep pushing this community forward, keep revitalizing, you know, keep making your streetscapes nice, and hopefully get some ideas that you can test out on your downtown. And, you know, it could be as simple as repainting a couple things and then taking data for a few months and seeing how do people like it. You want to try something new? So I appreciate your guys' feedback. It's been a lot of fun to interact with you today. And I can't wait to just dive into doing some work and what I'm going to be able to share with you along with Mitchell tomorrow and Lizzie. So I'll let Lizzie, is she going to say something?
So we are going to spend tomorrow morning compiling everything and adding some new ideas, printing stuff out and pinning it up tomorrow over at the new Our Katahdin space. So just across from where we were today, across from Heritage Park. We're gonna use the windows to pin stuff up and ask folks to comment on it. It's kind of a whirlwind couple of days. So we're gonna get as far as we can by 12 p.m. tomorrow. And then we have a few hours after that to put together a presentation for town council. And then after that, we will be wrapping things up, polishing them up, packaging them, and sending them back to everyone.
There'll be 2 rounds of feedback.
Yeah, so there'll be a couple of rounds of feedback. And then there's also opportunities for people to comment online. All of the boards from this afternoon will be posted as images so people can comment in the comment boxes. And, you know, as James mentioned, it's not permanent. These are kind of ideas to present to everybody to use for next steps. So we will be out at noon tomorrow. There'll be lunch again, and we hope we see you there.
All right. Does anybody have any closing comments, questions, insights?
Thank you guys so much, James, Lizzie, Mitchell, Lucy. This is awesome.
Thank you all.
All right. Meeting out. Bye, guys.
Talk to you soon.